Thanks for joining us this afternoon. I'm super excited for this panel. I've got two amazing women that are with me to talk about digital signage trends from their perception, what they see, what's happening in the industry, to how they see this kind of evolving. So very excited. Just a quickie for those that don't know me, I'm Brian Mazzaros. I run a digital experience agency called OpenEye Global, and also part of the Digital Signage Federation. So with that, I would love to introduce the two panelists that are with me. First I'm going to introduce, so we have Carol Feely-Barrio, who's over at Charcoal Blue. Carol, I'll let you introduce yourself, actually.
Hi, how's everyone? My name is Carol Feely-Barrio. I'm the Associate Director of Project Management at Charcoal Blue Experience. Charcoal Blue does consulting as well as project management services. So I lead up the project management team.
Awesome. And Nicole Richardson-Fafara over at EGAT. Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. My name is Nicole Richardson, and I am Creative Services and Project Manager for a manufacturing and fabrication company.
Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you both for joining. Actually, what's really kind of nice about this is both of you have been around for a very long time. So I think it always makes it easier when you talk about trends with people that have seen it in so many different perspectives. And I love this too, because both of you bring such a very unique perspective from your backgrounds that I think trends, when you talk about trends, I think that's a different take on it from both. So, there's so much going on in the industry, and, even our, conversation and figuring out about this is like, where do we start? Because there's so many topics to dive into. And, I think, what would be kind of interesting, I think, to start from is just, as a general, I mean, each of you come from these different backgrounds. So I'd love to start there from what you're seeing, just sort of top level, based upon the projects and the experiences that you're working on. What are some things that you're encountering sort of every day? And Carol, I'll kind of start with you from sort of the experiential environment side. Like, what do you kind of see from your day to day?
Apologies, Brian. My internet just dropped out for a second. Here. You can just repeat the last 30 seconds.
Yeah, sure. No, I was saying I'd like to start, because you both have diverse backgrounds. So from your side of coming from the experiential environment side, what are some things that you're seeing on a day-to-day that you're being asked for by clients, or you're seeing as trends that you need to think through or observe as you're planning out projects?
Sure. I mean, one of the big trends we saw, particularly post-COVID, well, pre-COVID, everyone wanted touchscreens. They wanted to sort of interact with, with the exhibits or with the activations. And now what we're seeing is a lot more graphics, less interaction. And interaction is done using hardware as opposed to touchscreens. Again, post-COVID world, the thought then is having to clean those screens, having to maintain those screens can be difficult, especially when you're dealing with when you had a pandemic on your hands. So a lot of the installations that we had done, they were being closed off or roped off because they couldn't be cleaned frequently enough. So one thing we are seeing is we're seeing also a lot more content updates and things like that being as part of contracts, because clients are worried about their content becoming stale. That's been really important. You can put something up and install it and have content running, but if you have the same content running for 3 to 4 years, that's pretty dry. So the idea that people want to maintain it and keep it fresh.
And Nicole, from your side, because I know, part of your work is focused in casinos, but I know that you have been around and have seen many different verticals, but I'm just kind of curious from what are you seeing? Maybe not just focused on that, but just in general that you have to think through.
For me, it's been more along the lines of, for the casinos, they usually start off with nice LCDs. Now they've moved over to LEDs and more customized versions of how they present the signs. Instead of just having one screen on the top, they have a circular screen created with LEDs, and it's much brighter graphics, a lot more fun looking graphics versus the stale version that used to be like come play blackjack. Now they actually have, more like gaming design, like video gaming design.
So I'd like to, I think the one that I kind of interested to sort of dive into a little bit is, it seems like every year, when we have these conversations, other colleagues have this conversation, I feel like one trend that always comes up is LED. And I feel like it just continues every year. It's a trend, and it shifts from the cost has gone down to the flexibility you have from design and implementation. And now it is obviously trending towards sustainability. But I'm curious from how you perceive, and I think, Nicole, you touched on a little bit, with LED becoming a more prominent display technology, do you see anything different or a different perspective? Or do you find it easier to put that in front of your clients as an alternative, or as a sort of a primary display technology as you're thinking through experiences? What are you seeing?
I think it's much easier because, like you said, the sustainability, and then taking it from the game itself, the housing in which it's in, to the environment in which it's in. So creating interactive rooms that use the LEDs like around the room as well as on the display, so you have the same balance of brightness. And when it comes to recycling or replacing, it's much easier to do that with LEDs versus LCDs.
I guess, Carol, over on your side, because the environments and projects you're working on, I kind of almost, correct me if I'm wrong, but I see LED as just being a must-have or a needed to, in there. I mean, how are you finding it as speccing it in and planning?
I mean, it's pretty standard for us at this point. Large scale, pardon me, large scale LED walls are, if you're doing an event space, there's probably an 80% chance at this point that your upstage wall is going to be an LED wall. And it makes perfect sense. If you're relying on a single projector and you have a projector failure, you've lost all of that real estate. You've lost all of that signage capability. If you lose a couple of pixels in an LED, there's a modularity to that. And that's really important. It's usually a quick, easy fix. Typically, it's just a magnetic face. And you can send those parts out for repair. So Nicole was absolutely spot on. Sustainability is important. One of the values, particularly at Charcoal Blue, is sustainability. And it's something that we're looking at turning, really making part of our designs to have this sustainable life cycle to them, where components can be recycled. If they can't be recycled, can they be cleared and donated? So there's some important things to look at, even in the design phase or the SD phase of, okay, we're building these, but what are we going to do with them later?
Yeah.
And LEDs are a great solution to have that modularity. If you decide you want to take down the wall and use it elsewhere, you can take half of that wall and use it elsewhere.
Yeah.
You're not locked into one aspect ratio. And if you have a custom curve,
Yep.
you can work on, you don't need to work on you can build that frame, and there's plenty of LED companies out there that do curved walls. So you're less locked into those ratios.
How do you see interactivity, kind of speaking with interaction and touchscreens and LED, as finding applications or solutions to where putting in LED and using interactivity at the same time? And I've seen panels now that are evolving to where they have sensors built into them, to where panels are being touched to, even potentially in some cases overlays, and then also just other sensors that could be used for interactivity as well. Do you see, as LED becomes more prominent, a challenge in achieving both the interactive aspect of it as much as well as a unique visual?
I do, because of the scale of LED. You can build LED very large, and the interaction of that is going to be based on how large that installation is. For years ago, I did an installation that it was projection, but it's interactive in that we used IR cameras pointing down at the wall. So when you held your hand up to the wall, you could grow a plant. It's a beautiful exhibition at the New York Hall of Science, part of a children's museum, and it was incredible. But it's very simple IR technology. There's just IR cameras, and I think something like that could be replicated. But I think it has to be purposeful, depending on the scale of the wall, because you can lose. you can spend, if you have a 20-foot wall, how are you going to interact with that top, 10 feet, 12 feet of that wall? I mean, I'm pretty tall, but I still can't interact with a 12-foot, a 12-foot wall. So yeah, we want to make sure that real estate can be used appropriately, right? And you're not spending all this money in technology that will never be integrated or never need to be integrated. If it's a 2-story installation, that could be kind of cool if you have a mezzanine.
Sure.
And you're like, that would be really interesting to see how that could be done. But I think the sensors in LED walls, obviously, the more components you add, the more links to the chain that you put in. So you always want to be careful of that. But between overlays, absolutely, and of course the cost of those is going to be pretty insane. But even just regular IR cameras, you can do a lot.
Nicole, how do you find it? I mean, in the environment that you're working in, I mean, everything revolves around digital and touch and experience. So,
I was going to use the example of triggers in like high-end gaming rooms. Like the jackpot, like if somebody wins a jackpot, it's just kind of like everybody wants to come and see what's going on when you hear that sound of somebody winning the jackpot. Yep. But now with the triggers that are used within EGATs, they can have that trigger go off and the whole room lights up. Okay, so it can get people to come over to that high-end gaming room from across the casino. Okay, so that type of interaction and visual effects can be profitable.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's as these technologies become more readily available. We've seen it as well with sensors and just unique tactile experiences. Definitely I see that as an emerging trend, which I think both of you agree with this as well. So it's going to be interesting to see when the question gets asked next year. What does next year bring? With regarding with LED. The one part too, which we didn't even kind of touch on too, I know with LED is pitch as well. Obviously with direct view and you do have different pitches, tighter pitches that are coming out, and so obviously there was always the challenge too of more factoring of distance and determining what pitch is most correct. But it seems like that is becoming even easier to sort out too. I know those panels are still expensive, but they are coming down. So sub 1 is not as expensive as it was 2 years ago. So I'm kind of curious, as you look at it, how much do you have to think about in terms of future proofing these experiences too from a content perspective, so that are you looking at the sub 1s, or are you still in that above 1, and you're okay to live with that for a period of time? And I guess Nicole, actually I'll start with you, and then I'm kind of curious, Carol, on your thoughts on that.
That part I don't really deal with, but in long term, we usually, like when designing something, we design it so we buy large bulk of one type of screen so that we can use it with multiple different types of screen. And then within storage, you have easy for replacement and repair.
Yep.
So that's how I would answer that one.
Gotcha. Carol, what about from your side?
I think, when LED first started coming out, I mean, you mentioned that we've been working in this a long time, and it feels like forever when you look back at the technology of LED, right? Like the pixel pitch pricing used to be so disparate. There was such a difference between a wide pixel, your wide pitch and your narrow pitch, and that's not as broad of a span now that it used to be. I think it's still there, but it was pretty extreme at the time. And if you go to Times Square and you look at some of the LED signs that are up, there was that this is Starbucks LED sign that was done probably in 2012, give or take, and they're giant pixels, right? It's huge. There's so much space in between compared to one of the newer signs. So it's almost like an archaeological exhibition, right? Just sort of walking around Times Square and looking at the signs, and you can kind of tell when they were installed by the pitch that they're at, particularly for advertising and retail, because you're going to usually get a mid-range. You're not usually going to get a high-end LED wall. But now it's a lot easier. It's a lot simpler. And I feel like it's a lot more standardized maybe now than it used to be.
Yep.
Yeah. I think in content creation and content development, again, has really kind of leaned into its own cadence. It's really sort of figured out, retailers have figured it out, clients have figured it out, corporate clients, what that needs to be, who needs to be doing it, and how often it should be done. Because it's not necessarily something, again, right, like we said, that we do once and it just stays. To keep it dynamic, you have to keep updating it. And then there's contracts in place, or there's people on teams who are dedicated to that when before it wasn't really that.
Well, I think that's actually kind of interesting, because I think that brings up another trend that I think, and I think I'm kind of curious in your take, is I feel that away from the technologies, I feel like there's a trend in increase in services being offered to support everything. For a while, digital signage projects were just known as really having a SaaS fee associated with it and an upfront cost on hardware. And so then you look at integrators to agencies, to designers, to everything in between. There's now a focus on service-oriented offerings to support aspects of it. And you touched on a little bit with content. Actually, both of you touched on with content, and I think even Nicole, you were talking a little bit from the maintenance part of it. Now, I'm kind of curious, because it's a trend, but what's interesting about this trend is it's not a CapEx trend, it's an OpEx trend. And so, Nicole, I kind of curious to pick your brain about this one, but with everything that goes in there, and now that there is a need to support that, how is that conversation, or how do you see that as a trend to account for, knowing that there is all of these ongoing associated services that are necessary? I do want to say they are necessary, but how do you position, or how do you plan for or think through that piece of it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to re-clarify my statement about the pixel pitch, because we standardize for 4K. Okay, we didn't use anything less than, because we know that that's the foundation in which we can stand upon. Okay, so that's why it's easier to purchase that way. Okay, in regards to services and following up, I think that prior to COVID, everybody was pushing out all different types of technology, trying to fill the need. Right now, I think the future would be following up with all of those clients to ensure that they understand how to use it and what are next steps, because I see a lot of digital signage and equipment just running the same content, not really knowing what they should be doing with it. So following up from that perspective to make sure those clients know what the next steps are for their systems. So kind of having a business analyst or customer service representative going back to follow up on those clients, or the clients that we've had, within the last 2 or 3 years before the life cycle of those products to let them know what's next, how to refresh everything, whether it be technology, content, or overall usage for their environment. And I think those environments can change, because you come in initially regarding the touch screens and COVID, but then move forward to office communications, internal communications, as well as making environmental updates to add additional signage based off of the need.
Yep. Carol, from your side, I mean, sort of back to the part of this ongoing, or thinking through that, I mean, how is that for you in positioning that as part of a project? Because I imagine that's a key part of what you do, past putting something in place and designing it. It's how does that, or how do you frame that with the client?
I think the important part is that over the last 10 years or so, we've really, having used the technology, having integrated the technology, having troubleshot the technology and maintained it, I think we've all learned that it's a specialized system.
Yep.
And the more specialized the system, it's kind of like if your HVAC goes out, you have HVAC company come back and do a service visit, right? They become part of a building system. Whether it's advertising signage or interactive signage or a museum or a display, there is a really important step of service You have to think about that because, you know, these do go out. Sometimes they overheat. You know, we don't put LED walls behind glass walls anymore, you know, because it's too hot, right? And you have to be really careful about airflow. And these are things that we've all learned because inevitably, you know, we all have experience. We've looked at something and said,
Yep.
that's probably not going to work. Maybe we should fix that. But having those years behind us enables to put us in a place where we can keep the relationship with the clients going. And I think, Nicole, you had said that too, right? Like constantly checking in with your clients. You know what the service level needs to be. You can set up service agreements with integrators, whatever. And as an owner's rep, that's something that we do a lot with our clients is that we have, okay, we're going to build this, but we need to look ahead at what it's going to look like in terms of operations. You know, every 6 months, there's going to be a service visit. There needs to be cleaning of the equipment once a year, et cetera, whatever the service agreement is going to be. And that can include content refreshes. And then usually in 3 to 5 years, maybe you have an equipment update. And how do we deal with spare equipment? How do we deal with service calls? You know, say your whole, and doing museum installations is like this, right? You get a call at 7 o'clock in the morning, you know, the system won't turn on. You know, how do you get someone out there to do that? So that's really important to keep in mind what you're installing, that it's serviceable, because that's part of having your name on something that's been built and designed is its accessibility.
You know, I think that the interesting part to this too, and maybe even taking a step back, is I feel that this trend of associated services, in some part, is being accelerated just because of some of the complexities of the applications that we're all speccing in for the client. You know, I think, and again, this is where I feel like we missed some trends just because you know the amount of time that we have. But you look on embedded devices now and displays, and you look at different media player configurations, plus different LED, plus displays, and then we put that all together. You know, I think to both of your points, it creates this kind of situation where you do need help. It will go down. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag. That will happen. It will happen. It's as much as you know you don't want that to. It unfortunately will. But I think that's where this trend I see on services is just sort of accelerated because of that complexity, because of all those different solutions that exist. That just naturally there does need to be another set of hands alongside of the client to support them. So I feel that's interesting.
Also, with LED technology, a lot of it is integrated with building systems.
Yep.
You know, there's power cycling, you know, there's power saver functions, there's scheduling. So a lot of it is also intertwined with building systems that didn't really happen until maybe 5 or 6 years ago. You know, when we started adding signage into lead, you know, and lead structures, you know, how did we do that? And one of the things that you can do is you can shut the signage off at night.
Well, but I think where you're going though. That's another trend too that we haven't even touched on. So I feel that, you know, you had digital signage that was maybe relegated to retail or to banking in the beginning, to smaller verticals, and then all of a sudden now you are into casino environments, you're into themed spaces, corporate environments that do tie into all these other systems that make it even more complicated because of that integration. So I think for, you know, maybe a trend that we're just talking about here in general, it's just the fact that digital signage has now continued to expand into so many different environments that we need to be conscious of that. Sorry, Nicole.
Oh, I was just going to say the information about it being integrated into lead and then taking the time to understand digital signage and how it can change the entire environment.
Yep.
To me, that's one of the better trends, seeing how it's working with architecture. So I like that one a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. You know, one other trend I'd be remiss not to mention it or not to talk about it. You know, I think AI is something that just continues to come up, and I guess almost it follows the suit of what we were talking about before, to where different environments have different needs for, you know, AI engines or you know, that aspect of it. So, you know, people see it from different perceptions as far as what it's needed or how it comes into play. So I'm curious, just from both perspectives, have you encountered aspects of it has it been brought up by a client, and have you done anything, with implementing it on any aspect of it, from programming to planning? I know a lot of architectural firms are just using it on planning documents. A lot of us use it to cheat on proposals with ChatGPT. No, just kidding. But I'm curious, Carol, with you, what has your, experience or exposure been to, to machine learning, to AI?
Sure. And being on the project management side, we're seeing that more with sort of internal functions, right? Scheduling, dashboarding, reporting, data visualization. We're seeing a lot of AI included in that, which is great, because honestly, those are they're tasks that are sort of a drudge, right? Nobody wants to do that. AI assisted scheduling is delightful. Is it always right? Never. The more we use it, the better it's going to get, right? But will it ever take the place of someone reading a schedule and going through the predecessors? Absolutely not, right? But like you said, cheating on a proposal. I start documents all the time in ChatGPT. I do a lot of educational sessions within our team, and I start a lot of them with like, okay, tell me all about this, and it puts together a series of notes, and it's up to me as the human to focus through those notes and go through and decide what stays or what leaves. But I think overall, in terms of design, I'm not seeing it. It can't take the place of the conversation, right? And the conversation is the important part for us. It can take the place of the housekeeping. And I think that's really helpful, because it allows you to really focus on that conversation. And I know, when that we've had some clients that have used some AI functions for content and things, but that's all been on the client side on my end. So I haven't had too much exposure to it. But outside of the, when are we going to put it in, and when is it going in? When is that too late?
Mm-hmm. Nicole, how about you? What has your experience been?
I've worked with a couple of clients that have used it for content. Okay, I've used it for a presentation, and as I was saying during the presentation, it's very difficult to be inclusive in a lot of the presentations that we do, especially like PowerPoint or for conferences and things, to be inclusive. So with AI, it's very easy to do that. Okay, versus going out, having a photo shoot and doing things like that to pull together the information to show, hey, women can do this job, men can do this or that, and to show all the different cultures. But I have to definitely say I've used it for presentations, proposals, and reports, and I love it.
No, it's I answer I put the question out there because, I think a lot of people obviously want to hear it as a trend, and I get it, because it is. But I think the reality is not everyone's going to have the same answer on what their exposure has been to it. Even us from an agency standpoint, we've seen more on the creative. Obviously still not at the point just yet of doing a lot of generated animations. So there still is aspects of that are not quite there yet, but there are a lot of CMSs that do have aspects of it that are built in, from programming to automation of content and delivery, which is certainly interesting and worth taking a look at, because there are ones out there that are evolved, that are worth implementing. So I think that's another one of those interesting trends that then kind of continues to grow. But I think what's kind of nice is that you put that into the mix, and then you go back to a previous conversation about services. You can't help but to see, again, services, I think, is just an ongoing trend. There's going to be another added element of monitoring and implementing of an AI engine as a trend, as a service, that might not just be content focused only, but a part of everything that you're overseeing for a project. So that's why I feel like that is just, I know people are scratching their heads and say, why are you seeing services as a trend? And I think the reality is not everyone sees services as an opportunity or a need for projects. And, I think that's a debatable argument, to where it is a need to, and there is a growing need to define what those services are, and to couple them with the project. No project should go out the door without some type of ongoing service attached to it.
Exactly.
And I think we're just kind of like, oh, I think we're kind of coming up with this or consciously understanding this as we talk this through. But I don't know, how do you feel about that? I mean, I feel like there's more to discover around services that we're not even touching on right now.
I feel like a lot of times you just want to get the project done. Once it's done, then it's, the salesperson sells it, you get the project done, it's installed, everything's all good. Then the turnaround time of how long you wait before the salesperson or the business relationships manager goes in to confirm that everything is all good from every aspect, and then to take it to the next level on what they're going to do for the customer and what their needs are, and really digging in deep with that, to figure out if there's a new scope that you need to follow, or something that you need to fix or resolve, or how to cut back on the cost for the next phase of a project, instead of just going, oh, it's sold, it's done. Hey, do you guys need content? Hey, just the quick sales call. I think it needs to be a little bit more in depth.
Yeah.
I would 1,000% agree with that. I think, traditionally the sort of Project Management Institute definition of a project is something that has a start and an end.
Correct.
And traditionally we've looked at that as to the design of a project to the execution of a project. But I think what we're missing in that conversation is that project life cycle, right? We're looking at equipment that does age. We're looking at equipment that also doesn't age well, right? There's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of new things coming out. And you do have to look at this every 3 to 5 years. So if we implement the life cycle analysis on it, that 3 to 5 years, what's happening with that equipment? How much heat is it putting out? How much air conditioning we're going to have to use to counteract that heat? And Nicole, that's huge for you being in Las Vegas, right? Like, if I'm installing something in Ireland, it's totally different than I'm installing something in Las Vegas. So we have to look at the regionality of it, looking at the equipment that we can use. Again, what can be recycled, what can be repaired, what can be donated, and putting that plan together as part of the design, and not waiting until all the stuff is sitting in someone's garage. What do I do with all these things, right? Like, so I think it's really important that the life cycle becomes part of the design, which is a bit of a hard sell because people don't want to think about how they're going to deinstall something they've just installed. But I think as good human practice for the amount of things. I mean, there's a lot of waste in construction. There's a lot of waste in AV, and we can really look at it and really tighten up what needs to happen as we go through and as we start deinstalling these equipment. There's nothing sadder than an LED wall that has a warning screen on it, or an LED wall that has a blue screen, right? Like,
it hurts my feelings to see stuff like that.
I can cry, even if it's not mine. It's like, oh, I know that feeling. So.
I'd also like to add, like, since I transitioned to working in manufacturing for this portion of my contract, I've learned so much, since the end user side. So seeing how you can refurbish or recreate something, that is also something that a lot of companies need to take a look at, on how to refurbish an old design to make it still useful.
Yeah. I agree with that. So I know we're kind of coming, towards the end, and so the last one I do kind of ask trend-wise is, from your own kind of take, and again, you two work in somewhat different verticals and environments. What do you see as the next trend in terms of just an overall experience, happening? And Carol, I'll kick off with you. Like, what is the next interesting museum, theatrical, environment, immersive, I'm running to Disney to see experience that you think is coming?
I think it's immersive. I think you just hit on it. I think there's a verticality, there's a horizontalness, right? There's a scale that things are being designed in. I mean, look at the MSG Dome, right? The scale of that is tremendous. And what that's done for all of what, I mean, it's finally like the first time in my life where my family understands what I do for a living, sort of. because we used to, we used to just put up displays, and we used to conference rooms and theaters, and you know what I mean? And it was very sort of specialized, but now we're really getting into these specific custom immersive designs. And I think it's great. And I think even traveling designs, you see those immersive Van Goghs and the immersive Clint exhibitions that are happening. And I think we're going to see more of that. I think people want bigger. They don't just want a screen. They want the screen to curve over their head. Right? And I think we're going to see more of that as we get going. And I think just like everything else, it's the walls have gotten bigger, displays have gotten bigger, the prices have kind of settled down, and I think now we're going to start to see that customization really come in.
So is this another U2 concert experience coming at us really soon? I hope not.
I hope not. Not my favorite band. No offense to anyone who does love U2, but but I do appreciate the architecture and the event technology that went into that construction project. It's absolutely tremendous. And I mean, how do you take your eyes off of it? I mean,
no, it's true. Very true. Very true.
I mean, Nicole, like, you're looking at it every day, across the country at least.
And Nicole, I feel that you're in an environment where no client is ever satisfied or happy, even as a project goes underway, because I feel like I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they're midway through it and they're like, I should have done that. Can I do that? Let's do that. Stop.
Right.
I mean, where do you see it going? Because I can only imagine. I don't know how you have all your hair, because I feel like you some days you're probably like, I just got to pull it out because I'm being driven nuts here.
Right. So I was talking to Carol about that, and it's along, like, I'm taking project management courses, so you understand that there's a beginning and there's an end to a project. Okay. But on the more agile type things, when you have a customer that's like, well, what about this? Well, what about that? You have to have a stopping point that you can go back to your backlog and go through some things and figure out how you're going to integrate it, phase it in after the fact.
No.
Okay. But yeah, that is the stressful part, but that's where I think good communication and emotional intelligence comes into play, because you have to work with the client to make them happy, but know that you have an end game that's going to make them love you.
I like that. I actually, well articulated. Well, I think that perfect.
Change management is a delicate process on all ends. I would totally agree with that.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I agree with you both. I mean, there's so many ways of now seeing experiences defined by architecture, defined by technologies, but I think it's anything that really kind of boils down to getting you more involved in the experience unknowingly. That's the part that I love. Is before, you always had to be sort of invited to do something, but if you're doing something unknowingly and things are reacting to you, I think that's more of what you're going to start to see. And you see that now too. I mean, to geek out a little bit, I mean, some of the theme park experiences been opening up over in like Tokyo, I think, are a good example of that. Those museums and theme parks that have been popping up over there, I think, are a demonstration of what that could be. And you could see that into some of other environments that are starting to open. So
I think
there's a lot.
I think it's going to be a combination of like the theme park concept and what we're doing with entertainment and sporting events. I don't know if you guys taken a look at the concept they have for the baseball stadium.
Yes.
For Las Vegas. If they get it, that's going to be pretty interesting. And I'm pretty sure it's going to be, they're going to use more biomatrix and, more interactivity and more to get everybody involved, because you pay so much to go to these events. I just think about, I can't remember, and I'm not a sports person, so I'm sorry, but the court for the Indianapolis basketball team. You guys know what I'm talking about? They made it
at the All-Star break.
Yeah, that was like so amazing. So I've always liked the graphics associated with sports, and I thought that was just taking it to a whole nother level. And I know that that concept's been around for a while. So I think it's not new, but it's a different way to present the technology in a sector that you wouldn't have normally thought it would be.
I think you see it too if you've been into like Brian, if you've gone into Moynihan Station, right behind Penn Station, you know, it's not immersive, it's not interactive,
An interface.
but it's designed, and it's designed to surround you, right? It's lighting, and it's signage, and it's kinetic, it's moving. So as you're walking through, you're like, wow, everything is white, right? So everything has this projection surface built into it. So even though it's not necessarily covered in LEDs or covered in displays, there is this kinetic movement to it. And I think we're seeing that a lot more. Things are energizing.
Well, thank you both for taking the time to chat. I really enjoyed it, and I hope everyone else did as well.
Yeah.
Before I let you both go, I know, you know, obviously on the website, both of your LinkedIn profiles are there, but just if anyone wanted to reach out, or just where can they find you, Twitter handles, or X handles, sorry, I get that wrong all the time, but Carol, sorry, where they can find you?
If you could reach out to me on LinkedIn, that is the best place. I do not have an X handle. I'm not that fancy, but or carol.feely@gmail. Feel free to send me an email.
Awesome.
I'm more than happy to chat.
Perfect.
Yeah, LinkedIn for me as well. I'm not that cool to have all these extras. Okay, I'm just like, I got a lot going on, so.
I agree. Well, thank you so much. I actually really enjoyed it. So always a pleasure to chat with you both. So.
Brian, this was great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, it was good.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.